Atlas Fallen comes out May 16th from Deck 13. It's a title that aims to hit a wide swath of genres all at once. Hub-based exploratory, third-person action game, and it's coming out for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And you may be wondering to yourself, what is Atlas Fallen? It's a good question because not a lot of people know. They announced this at an event, they showed a little trailer, and that was it. I got hands-on with the title for a great deal of time. I'm going to talk to you about it. This is the story of an ancient sun god, heavy in brightness but steeped in darkness, extracting the toll of life from the planet's inhabitants in a consistent set of rituals until your character finds a mysterious gauntlet, and together they decide that the time is right to split away from the current factions and return the land to the people themselves. I'm not sure why the 1980s sentient jelly bracelet fad has suddenly come back, though here, admittedly, it is a gauntlet, but it's hard not to notice just how many games seem to be skewing this way with a character, especially when it comes to a character's guide within the game world. And I'm going to talk about that here. Subscribe if you like the video. My sponsor's me. My brand is me. This will be mostly B-roll, as once again, we have a company that doesn't really want you to see what's going on the screen that isn't already vetted by them. I do want to make sure that you understand that my version was actually running better than the B-roll you're going to see here. But such is life. There's no mistaking the thematic and gameplay comparisons that arise from Atlas Fallen, from Destiny to Outriders, Avengers, and more. Perhaps the most telling, though, is like a desert Darksiders, hulking men and women with giant gauntlets, a penchant for platforming, and moving across a massive world with one hub, a friendly village to the next, utilizing combos with massive weapons to take down an assortment of enemies. Here, the weapons are made from the earth or sand itself, like axes and swords, as well as adding the abilities to the characters that sort of go into those fictionally, like tornadoes, adding relics to the gauntlet and outfitting yourself with various armor and equipment you find in the game's full loot system. You can become the savior of this desert world. Now, any action game, especially one that has you exploring the dune-like region of an extra fantasy world, needs excellent combat and enemies. Otherwise, it falls to the wayside, like an amazing movie idea that never gets to film. Within Atlas Fallen, enemy makeup is more like smaller group enemies, medium and huge-like creatures. Enemies in the preview that I saw has you cracking different parts of them to do more damage to the larger enemies. So, for example, they may have some particular armor point that you break. You can easily get killed if you push that without paying attention, while the smaller and medium enemies are a little bit more forgiving. Smaller groups of enemies, both ground-based and flying, consistently close in on you as locations that you explore within the game world are usually strung about from sort of hub point to hub point. Use 2-button combos to string together attacks with floating parries and dodges. Locking and unlocking enemy targets with the flick of the gamepad stick allows you to free run in combat as well, or again, lock onto a specific body part if you're fighting those larger enemies. Be aware the tutorials were with gamepad, so that's how I played with this. Now, as the hero, you have a momentum system in combat. This is central to almost everything that Atlas Fallen has and is presenting to you. It wants to be this and show you to this, but it's also subtly delivered. So much so that even realizing it's a gameplay element can take you a tiny bit of time. Momentum builds as you hit enemies, and as you hit, you can do more combos that you've unlocked versus spinning them directly for moves as we've seen in other games. However, as you gain momentum, you start to basically push yourself too hard and harder and harder still, resulting in overextending yourself, which means that you can then take more damage. What that means is there's this odd dance between risk and reward, but also on the cross axis of the game player themselves really choosing how far they want to engage with it. The huge problem that I can see that this might lead to is some gamers feeling like the only way to see or do some of the coolest stuff in this game is to play the exact way Atlas Fallen wants you to, and it can lead to the developers having to figure out a way to balance it. They did make Surge 1 and 2, and I figured they probably know what they're doing. Those games may have had their issues, but I actually didn't find that combat was one of them. The game has a dodge and a parry system, with parry instantly refreshing if you succeed in its use, or burning away and needing to refresh if you missed it. Now, while Forspoken had sprinting, many games have horses or flying steeds, Atlas Fallen has sand skis, though they're invisible. It's best to not dwell on exactly how all this is going on, but it's another gift that's bestowed by the gauntlet that you found, and you can ski around up or down and across the dunes, combining it with double jumps as well as aerial attacks against flying creatures. Platforming isn't just double jumping and sand skiing though. You can also use the magic gauntlet that can raise fallen pillars from the earth to get you to places that you weren't able to get to, or discover lost artifacts long buried in the sands of time. Like an infinity gauntlet stuck on one color, you run around the game world upgrading it, and during the preview I got to see how some of this would work with both platforming as well as combat. And really the comparisons here are with games that we've seen recently, not in a bad way. Let me explain this. For example, a lot of Atlas Fallen feels a bit like Forspoken, but there's something that's less loose about this game, and it's more fun as a result of that. Leaping around the game world using the gauntlet to raise up some lost Tower of Babel and then leap on it to further explore was enjoyable. Slashing through enemies with weapons created from the sifting sand itself is a very unique idea. You can watch them solidify and then actually briefly disperse with each hit. It makes the solid weapons hit with an impact you expect, but also reflects the magic that's so obviously been gifted to the main character, and I really like the idea. Artistically, the game does look like a mix of other titles as well. Hub areas are wide enough to look a bit open world, and characters and locales have a very Darksiders style look to them, with cities and towns and other bandit areas also reminding me a bit of Dragon's Dogma in the later locations. All these ideas and themes may or may not pay off as they're mixed together. Atlas Fallen would be spectacularly unique in an action platformer if it could take everything and merge it into one, filling a gap that at times feels like it hasn't been filled by much other than maybe a remake of Darksiders that we saw. Or it could really fall apart, a mess of ideas that never comes together and becomes nothing more than just a passing experience of random gameplay elements, as ethereal as the weapons that you swing around. And the fiction and the look of the world did grab me. Atlas also played incredibly smooth with no FPS issues throughout the demo, though it did have some pop-in, and this is well before the game goes gold. Artistically, I like the idea of the game and the characters, but the world does seem a tiny bit off. Previews have a tendency to be nothing more than public relations most of the time. However, as with any company I deal with, Focus and Deck 13 are open to me pointing out these weaknesses and just stating this is something that I noticed and having that reflect in the previews, and it is something that I noticed. At the same time, I also saw some stuff there that looked like it could be really cool. That's also why I have to mention again that using B footage is something we're seeing in a lot of these previews, and this was supplied, but my version ran better and in many places looked better. There are some spoiler moments in my gameplay I noticed when it came to text, so I figured that's most likely why they're doing this. And these days, companies are becoming more and more cognizant that even in their own previews, they sometimes have spoilers. Now, co-op is going to be available for the main game proper and during the review code timeframe, but it wasn't available for this time. Tracking the combat and checking into how enemies attacked, you can already see and start to parse out how Monster Hunter-like kind of battles would occur here. So far, Atlas Fallen has me interested, but not sold. The ideas, they're very sound. The world is coming on in a way that I'm really can get behind. However, Atlas Fallen is a title that looks a bit like multiple other titles put together and multiple ideas. This has happened before, but I can say that as I played, the combat and the momentum, as well as the parry dodge and your magical gauntlet, they're going to have to work together in really a perfect symmetry to not give gamers that feeling of whiplash, like they just walked away from one game that looked almost identical. Exploring and taking out enemies across the game is only going to be enjoyable if Deck 13 makes sure that the consistent feeling of reward is matched by the world and the creatures and the story. However, like most games, it's that cyclic rate in which the gameplay loop occurs across that time that ends up resulting in the sum of the enjoyment itself. What I saw and what I played, not too bad. It's just going to all depend on how much it comes together. And thank you for coming together for this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Join the Patreon if you like that kind of stuff. If not, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel. It helps me big time, and it helps fight against the worst boss in all of gaming, which is the gaming YouTube algorithm. Peace out. Gang, gang.